All right, mates, welcome back to the channel. We are going to talk a little bit about what is going down with Bassmaster and a couple other things. But I was fortunate enough to get invited on the show last night, on a podcast last night, fishing the DMV, just for a little bit. It was impromptu to talk about something that's going, some of the changes that have happened with bass, but also what's going on with just bass tournament fishing in general. Whether that be bass, MLF, the new series, new professional bass fishing series, or kayak bass fishing, which has exploded in the last couple of years. But the main topic really has been, I want to thank Thomas for the conversation, because it really had me thinking a lot this morning, and about decisions that have to get made from a lot of people. Like for me, for example, my plan was to fish in the Northern Open Upper Chesapeake, which is on September 8th. This year, as a precursor to next season, with the intention of fishing the Northern Bass Opens in 2023. But the wrinkle, now is the changes that have been made, which they call now the Bass Opens EQ, which is the Bass Opens Elite qualifying, right? That's for people who want to qualify for or fish professionally, in the Elite Series. Those people who want to make, their full-time job or full-time career as a professional, being paid to fish, bass fishermen in the Elite Series of bass. And there were a couple different ways to get that, to get there over the years. And ultimately one of the biggest hooks for people that have grown up bass fishing, especially in the South, most definitely. And for me in Virginia, growing up in Virginia and having Bassmaster Classics on my home river as a kid, and going to the Bassmaster Classic 3-4 years in a row, and literally standing next to people like Rick Clun, Gary Klein, Woo Daves. I'm talking, that's old school. I talk to a lot of people today, have no idea who those people are, because the kids are 18 to 25. They know who KVD is. They know who Mike Iaconelli is. They know all the people that came years after, and that's just how things work. But Bassmaster Classic's the big hook, right? So you can go through the Northern Opens, win the division, win an event, right, in your division, and go to the Bassmaster Classic. I think for the last few years, it's been you've had to fish all three events in your division and win any of those three events, and you've got an invitation to the Bassmaster Classic. Who doesn't want to go to the Bassmaster Classic, right? Ask any kid that's fishing, right? Any kid who's ever had the Bassmaster magazine, right? That's the hook of what I always have thought is the hook is the uniqueness of an open, okay? With the changes now, and keep in mind, an open basically costs a boater just in entry fees of about $1,800 per event. So that's $1,800 times 3 for your division. Okay, do that math just to fish. Okay, that's just to enter the tournament. That's not gas. That's not all the stuff that goes around with traveling. Now, with the changes Bassmaster has made for 2023, you now have to fish all 9 of the opens to qualify for the Elite Series. You can still go to from what I understand, someone could correct me in comments, or send me a message. You can still go to the Bassmaster Classic through your division if you just decide to fish the three divisional Bassmaster Opens and you win one of those. You still, from what I understand, can go to the Bassmaster Classic, but it will not matter. You will not get an invitation to the Bass Elite Series. The caveat is, in order to get one of the 9 invitations, which is more now an angler, it's more like a Bass Open Angler of the Year, okay, where the top 9 anglers of all 3 divisions, Southern, Central, and Northern, at least that's how the format is now, will get an invitation to the Bassmaster Elite Series. So the top 9, think of it like an Angler of the Year, if you think of it like that. The top 9 who have competed in all 9, or 3 Central, 3 Southern, and 3 Northern events, will get an invitation. What does that mean? Well, that invitation isn't entry. It means you've been invited to join. And we all know when you join something, there's a membership fee, if you have to look at it like that. And the membership fee back in 2019 was like 43,000. And then I think it was lowered after COVID and all that to 40,000. So you competed in 9 events. So let's just talk about getting to the Elite Series. Okay? You compete in 9 events on the Bassmaster Open Series. So that's, if rates stay the same, that's 9 times 1,800 just in entry fees. Okay? Versus how it used to be done, where you could compete in your regional or divisional. So the argument for a lot of people right now, you just had CPI 9.1%, gas, the American economy, all of that stuff at a time when we may be in the worst economy we've had in 40 years. Anglers are going to have to be putting out more capital, more money, more expenses, more travel, more lodging, more gas, more, in order to gain entry into the Elite Series or qualify for the Elite Series. And my first perception when I was learning that and talking with a few people was just like, how many people are going to finish in that top 9 that can't go to the Elite Series? Okay, you fish in Bassmaster Opens. A lot of those anglers are not sponsored, like fully sponsored. Okay, they fish their own boats. Okay, they're not 2023, 2022 bass boats. Okay, so that would not look good. That's why I looked at it. It's like, if all 9 could go, great. All 9 get the 40 grand or whatever it is through after they qualify, and then they work that magic and they get their new boat, and okay. But I just don't think, I think inevitably there are going to be a few that aren't going to be able to do it. And then you run into the whole rigmarole of all that points and this and that, and creates all that kind of stuff, I think, like any league or any organization. And so it's just, I think for most people, kind of caught people by surprise. But I will say this: bass isn't stupid, okay? And anyone who knows me, is like I was telling Thomas with fishing the DMV, you have to put your business cap on. And depending on what your background is, if you have a business background, if you have a marketing background, if you have a background like me, for example, that has worked for companies that have sponsored athletes, sponsored individual anglers, sponsored professional athletes, okay? Or worked with professional athletes, right? As part of the overall marketing branding for a company, okay? The anglers, actually, you could make the argument, and I'm sure there are people inside the table, okay, of executives at Bass, that the anglers actually were the catalyst for this movement, because at no time in the history of the Bassmaster Opens has there been so many anglers that have fished all 9 events. So think about that. They had over 80, I think 83. If you look at the analytics, and you guys know me, I always talk about analytics and metrics. I know people hate that stuff, that don't get it if you're not a geek for that stuff. But I think they had 83 anglers participate in all 9 events. That's a massive number, okay? If you think about it, that's 83 people paying $1,800 for 9 per event 9 times, and trap. So they already made that commitment. And so that's what Bass is looking at. We already have anglers that are willing to make the financial commitment, willing to make the family commitment, okay, of being away from families and traveling to 9 destinations across the country. So why not? In order to reward those 83 anglers an opportunity to get into the Elite Series. That's something that's probably not being really articulated a lot on YouTube with all the arguments and everything on social media. Is they already have 83 anglers that are already making the commitment. And then they have some anglers that are only fishing the 3 in their division. Okay? And so how do you balance those that are paying for 9 events versus those paying for 3 events, and who gets to go, who doesn't get to go? Who is Bass going to value more? Like, I know everyone wants equality, and everybody talks a great story about all things being fair and equal, but the reality from a business perspective is they're going to favor like people that are fishing 9 events, okay? $16,000 to $18,000 going to Bass versus the individual like me who's only going to fish 1, okay, or 3, right? Who's not going to travel all over the country, right? Okay, that's just not part of what the plan was, okay? And so now you have the still, if you fish all 3 in your division and you win an event, you can still go to Bassmaster Classic, get an invitation to Bassmaster Classic. Now it's not the top anglers in each division who have fished each event with points being invited to the Bassmaster Elite Series, Bass Elite Series. It's the overall top 9 who will qualify. So it doesn't matter, okay, what region specific or division that these anglers come from. It's all based on points. So then you get the argument, well, okay, points are based on finishes. And so you can make the argument that by requiring it to be 9 events all over the country, more or less, or most, let's be honest, east of Mississippi, that those anglers are more qualified to fish in the Bassmaster, the Elite Series, because the Elite Series does go in all different regions throughout the part of the country. Whereas instead of the guy who only fishes the Southern Division, Florida and places like that, finishes in the top 3, maybe maybe wins 1, finishes in the top 3, gets a Bassmaster Classic invitation, then also gets an invitation to the Elite Series, and then he goes in the Elite Series and basically finishes under 60 in every event his first year, except for Toho, right? Or except for wherever in Florida that Bass goes for the Elite Series. Like, so there's an argument to be made for there too. And so I kind of understand a lot of what Thomas was talking about in terms of what this does in terms of the feeder pool for Bass. Like, how does this impact a college series? Like, if you think about, like, for me, in terms of sponsoring, in terms of sponsorships, looking at young anglers, when I'm working with young anglers, high school now and college, what does that look like? Like, for me, working with a high school athlete, high school fisherman with his family in terms of sponsoring a young, outstanding hammer, okay, who's still in high school, who's going to come out, is going to take the college thing by storm. He's either going to fish at a college on one of the other events to sponsor tours, okay, may fish college kayak as well if Hobie keeps that alive, okay, and then may also will definitely fish sponsored BFL, okay, and then potentially Bass Opens. Now, that young man could be fully sponsored as a co-angler, is something that's being discussed for the Opens, which is $475 for an event, and he could fish all 3 Northern Series, or when he's ready, if he's ready, fish as a boater. And so you want there to be a level of gaining experience along the way, right? Especially now. It's bass and fishing has never been as popular as it is today with young people, competitive bass fishing, not recreational bass fishing. Okay? So you've got high school, you've got college kayaking, college boating, okay, you've got series MLF, series is bass, bass as a kayak series. Um, I'm not exactly sure. I can't really, kayaking is a totally different beast and a totally different conversation with people because people are so fractured in kayaking. There's no real unifying voice. There's no real unifying entity or organization like, say, bass. Really, and bass is involved in kayaking, but it's kind of like, I've heard people call it a throwaway. I've heard people call it, all kinds of things because they're bass. So the expectation for them to deliver a more of a quality product in terms of kayak fishing is there, and that's a compliment to bass because of their history of bass, as opposed to another organization, upstart, if you want to call it that, like a Hobie, who does it really well, and they're focused on their anglers, they're focused on their tournaments. That it's run by an actual hammer tournament angler, former tournament angler, who gets the angler perspective, and so it's run really efficiently, and people love it, and that you can't ask for anything more than that, right? The only problem that, if you call it a problem, the only problem with Hobie, is they're capped. I mean, I think they sold out all but one or two of their events this year at 200 anglers. Most people are not going to provide a permit for a tournament over 200 boats in most major areas. That's just the way it is, folks. And they could probably sell 250, 260, 270, 280 on a lot of these bodies of water. But it's all local permitting. It's all that approval. It's all that stuff comes into play that most people don't know about. And so they're kind of capped. So they're capped at 53,000 an event, right? In terms of 265, 200 people. And I think the math is right. And so, that's how Hobie does it. Bass for the most part is kind of at the beginning of the year. You kind of have to lock. I think you can give like an $800 deposit, but you kind of have to lock in a lot of this stuff early in the season. It's not like in kayak fishing where you can pay like Thursday the night before a tournament. And so I've had a lot of people that are still have boats, obviously, still compete competitively in boater tournaments, but they are now getting into kayak fishing. It's just a little bit, it's just a little easier, planning wise, family wise, money wise. It's not nearly as expensive. It's $115 per trail stop for KBF. They do two a weekend, so it's 115 and 115 for two events. Hobie's 265. I'm not really sure what bass is. And I'm sure it's somewhere in the middle. So it's a lot less expensive, right? You're not burning gas on the water, pre-fishing for 3, 4, 5 days, then competing for 2, 3, 4 days, in that regard. So it's a totally different beast, totally different animal. And they all have their issues. There's, and that's the thing. It's like people always talk about, like, why did MLF come into existence, right? Or after FLW, and then MLF, and there's bass and MLF, and it's hard to keep track of who's fishing and what, and all that stuff. Well, at the end of the day, competition will always come if someone believes they can do it better, or they can address things that aren't being addressed. If you don't take care of your anglers, it's the same as if you don't take care of your employees, right? You're going to get an exodus, and that's what you got, and in the boater divisions. Now, anyone can make an argument as to which one is better. I think the products are the products. I have my own opinion and my own that I watch consistently, but that doesn't mean that I'm not tuning in to the Elite Day 3 live right now, okay, for bass. Of course I'm going to tune in, right? If you're a bass fisherman, why would you not? Like, if you're not, you listen to it in your house, listen to it on your phone while you're doing whatever, while you're in the car, That's just what MLF Live, Bass Live, for the events. It's just, if you're passionate about fishing. But in terms of the product, totally another conversation. I've got my opinions, and both on the organizational level, whether you fished BFL or you fished Tackle Warehouse or anything like that, or if you fished a bass open division. You know, the same as the people that fish KBF, that fish Hobie, that fish bass. Everyone has their opinion. At the end of the day, you show up and fish. So part of my rub a lot with people on social media about in the kayak community is I don't have any barometer whatsoever one way or the other. I don't have a dog in the hunt one way or the other, because when it comes to kayak fishing, you just show up and fish. The problem I think that KBF has and will have, in terms of pushback, changes that get made, is people have gotten comfortable not coming to awards because of COVID, because we were virtual. And this is us. This is human behavior. And, and people can either accept it or not, but people now would rather not have to drive from the ramp when they get out to an award ceremony. Okay? That's on them. That's on those anglers. My argument is leave. I'm sure KBF doesn't want to hear that, or Hobie doesn't want to hear that, or Bass doesn't want to hear that. But it's like, dude, if you have a problem, leave. Don't fish it. And people don't. There are a lot of people. I know a lot of people who refuse to fish KBF events. Okay. But there's your opportunity. And this is what I talk to high school kids. And this is what I talk to college kids. Okay. And it's like, look, don't let the immaturity of adults, that's probably the wrong word. Although some are very, very immature about how they are. They're not professionals at all. I don't care if they've won checks. I don't care if they've won events. Professionalism is not winning an event. Professionalism is character. How you carry yourself, especially in public. And unfortunately, social media is public. It's public. And so what I tell them is like, look, if they don't fish, good for you. You have to look at things as a competitor. If you're in the Olympics and somebody tests positive for drugs and the number one sprinter tests positive for drugs and he or she can't compete, good for you. You're doing it the right way. And now you've got a better chance. And people will put an asterisk next to whatever. But the reality of it is, if people choose not to compete, just like what Bass is going to experience in these opens, there may be people who choose not to compete in all 9, which opens the door for someone else to get in that top 9 to get an invitation to spend $40,000 to fish for the year. Now, the question inevitably with all of these angling tournaments is like, okay, so you get in the Elite Series. How do you get out? Like, how do you get, not voluntary, how do you involuntary get asked to leave? Because if you get in and say this year and you don't finish in the top 80, top 60, whatever it is, I can't remember. These are like 80 people, 80, I think, in the Elite Series. You don't finish above 60th place in any event. Shouldn't you be pushed back down to have to requalify for the Elite Series? Right? Like, take a page out of the book of like professional sports leagues like the English Premier League. And if you're not familiar with the English Premier League, they have what's called you get relegated. Relegation. Okay, now you get into the Premier League, you're looking at getting 20, 30, 40 million just for getting in the Premier League. Okay? The clubs. Just from the television rights, just from all of that. So you could be the 20th place all season long, and you're going to get a piece of that pie. But at the end of the season, if you have finished in the bottom 3, you are going to get relegated, which means you get removed from the Premier League down to the Champions League. And the top 3 teams in the Champions League get moved to the Premier League. That's how it works. That keeps fans engaged. That keeps everything towards the end of the season, because there's so much drama at the end of the season for those last 3 spots. Okay? Why doesn't anyone in fishing do that? Why don't they say, if you finish in the Elite Series in the bottom 5 or 10, but say bottom 5. If you finish in the bottom 5 in Angler of the Year points in the Elite Series, you then have to go back down, requalify, and 5 new ones come up. Right? Like, but they don't ever talk about that. It could be happening. I mean, I really know. I mean, I know people drop out of the Elite Series. I really don't know what the, like, internal is. I mean, if you're taking 9 a year, I don't know if all 9 go in the Elite Series. You would think the Elite Series would grow, okay? But obviously people do leave the Elite Series, and they've had turnover, I guess, and all that. But is there a mechanism to where the Bass will remove someone, even if they're willing to pay the $40,000 to stay in the Elite Series, but they're just not performing? Because at the end of the day, you would think that the person would leave. You know, they would leave because they're not performing, they're not cashing check, necessarily they're making, although the payout scales are go all the way down. So it's almost like people are still getting some money back competing. But then you're left with your sponsors, and the sponsor's decision as to whether or not to keep backing those anglers. And that's where what Thomas was talking about with Fishing DMV, about how, like, this is why anglers now have basically doubled down on content, doubled down on making themselves even more viable from a branding perspective for their sponsors than their tournament wins. Because that content and that number of followers and number of people that pay attention to that specific angler can save their sponsorship. Right? Because most sponsors, there's always that small, like 5% or so, but most, the tournament win isn't, if you're a bait guy, then you're a bait guy and you win the Bassmaster Classic on a name brand bait that's sold at Bass Pro or Dick's or Tackle Warehouse or whatever. It's not custom, it's just mass produced bait. And you're sponsored by that brand, you're going to get locked in. You'll get locked in. Because people are going to run out and buy that bait. Okay? It happens all the time. And so, in that regard, you're going to be good. But the guy who's below 60, not on TV, he's not competing on cut day. Okay? He's not competing on the last day of the tournament. He's not on the live stream. He doesn't have a camera in his boat. He doesn't have any of that. And it's like that every single event. What's the sponsor supporting him actually going to conclusion they're going to draw? We're really not getting the bang for our buck, bud. Like, we love you, but we got to move on. Because there's always 9 more potential rising stars, right, coming in to bass, or at least there should be theoretically. Again, you don't really have that in kayaking. Everything's fragmented. You got trails, you got Pro Series, Trail Series, Hobie, Challenge Series with KBF. Bass just has their regular events. I think it's 4. I could be wrong, but will Bass increase the number of kayak series events in 2023? That's a big question. Is it viable to only have less events than your competitors on balance? And what's the purpose of it? If there is no intent to grow it and nurture it and bring more people into that. And, and that doesn't matter how effective or how great the actual events are run, from what I understand, they're run well. So, but I know here in my part of the country, just because of bad scheduling, that locally you don't schedule an Upper Chesapeake Bay event in August. And because vacation, back to school, it's just a bad time for anyone to schedule a tournament. It's not a knock on bass. It's just a bad time for anyone to schedule, a tournament for what I would tell non-professionals. The Bass Open is in the Upper Chesapeake, but it's after Labor Day. Kids are already back in school. Vacations have already happened. There's a significant break between the Oneida event, which happened in July, the first weekend in July, I think, for the Northern Open, and then 2 months later is the Upper Chesapeake event. So there's so it's just, for me, it's just like, it was just bad scheduling. Because I think they only had 42 kayak anglers show up. Mike Iaconelli, I think, won the event. Um, I think if you had that event on the Upper Chesapeake in April or May, or even June, you probably have 100 to 125 anglers. The local events, some local events have 30 anglers, 40 anglers, that are local trails, without the name recognition of Bass or Bassmaster. So, I mean, that's where that is. I just want to do the video here. Check out Fishing in DMV, Thomas's podcast. Give them a like and a follow. I know Thomas and I will continue the conversation. We had a bad connection last night because of electrical storms and all that stuff which is good for the river. I'm going to head out here on the Upper Potomac. If you are not aware, I will tell you that the Upper Potomac is at its lowest water levels this summer, and man, it is just unbelievable to wade fish or tether your kayak and hit the Upper Potomac right now, especially in the 80s. It's just a beautiful, beautiful place to go, and the fish are biting, and it's a lot of fun. It's a numbers game, for sure. For all of you, the recreational anglers, and if you're a tournament angler and you're stuck on that 1920 and 18, 1920, they're in there, but they're not obviously nearly as prolific as those, 12 to 14 pound smallies, or 12 to 14 inch, smallies. It's just a lot of fun. In this time of year, it's good to get out there as much as you can when the water is the way it is. All right. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Hope everyone enjoys the Bass Elite Day 3 event today, and get out there and get some river bassing in.